This episode is about minutes 101 through 105 of The Empire Strikes Back with returning guest Takeo Rivera. Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Nic Tan, feel free to call me Xanthi, and today is all about minutes 101 through 105 of Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, in which Luke enters the carbon freezing chamber. Boba Fett takes off with Han Solo as a shocked and disturbed Leia looks on, and Vader starts to talk / do a little bit of lightsaber clash with Luke. The set of minutes ends with Vader telling Luke, "Only your hatred can destroy me." I was going to say destroy you, but that too. Only your hatred can destroy me. This is a very dramatic set of minutes. It's extremely dramatic. And an appropriate guest for today is Takeo Rivera, who is an assistant professor of English at Boston University, as well as a playwright and a specialist in performance studies. And Takeo also teaches courses in contemporary drama and is just one of the smartest, coolest people I know who posts the best memes and whale content. So, hello, Takeo.
Hey, it's such an honor to be back. Thanks so much for having me.
You've come up, or I've been thinking about you a lot this season because the first time we talked, we were discussing Rey's cave scene in The Last Jedi. Yeah. And of course, this movie is where we get our first sort of Jedi vision scene. So especially during those cave minutes, I was like, the magic tree minutes, I was like thinking about the parallels to The Last Jedi.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I'm so pleased to be kind of talking about, and it's been a while since we had our first conversation, so I don't remember everything I was saying in there, but I will say that the original the original trilogy soundtracks, I know much better, like the music, like musically, just because when I was a kid. My parents had all the special edition soundtracks on CD, and then they like transferred those to like little cassette tapes, and they gave me a Walkman, and I would play these like these recorded cassette tapes on like every road trip that we took. So like I would just like listen to like Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, like on loop over and over and over again as we drove to any location, and I have a lot of fondness about that, and just like imagining all like different Star Wars battles and that sort of thing happening in my head as listening to this music. So it's whereas The Last Jedi, the music was still kind of fresh to me. Here it's like, oh yeah, like this is in my bones in a lot of ways. So,
yeah,
but yeah, the tree scene, really unnerving music.
Really unnerving music, that for sure. I feel like a lot of the music we get here is pretty unnerving too, as well as the sound design. Just when we enter this final act of The Empire Strikes Back, that Cloud City is what a location that is. It's like almost like all of the Cloud City stuff could be just one big dream or something. There's not really anything like it after it, I feel.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You know what's interesting? Like, I know that you're, obviously this is a music podcast, but I want to talk about the visuality for a moment.
Oh, please,
because, like, what's so interesting about Cloud City, right, is it is so bright. And come to think of it, Empire Strikes Back, like, has so much, like, bright palettes. Like, you think about Hoth as well. But, like, Cloud City looks so utopian at first glance, but it becomes a site of horror, right? But then you also have these insanely dark parts too. So obviously the lightsaber scene. So these like very, very, very horror movie aesthetics almost as that battle's coming, but counterposed with these very, very bright scenes that are also horrific in their own way because of Lando's betrayal and so forth. And what it sort of reminds me of in retrospect is Midsummer.
Oh, right? Interesting.
Just like, this kind of like brightness as a space of horror. Also with darkness as a space of horror. So both bright and dark can be horrific in Empire Strikes Back.
That's definitely true. And the color contrasts. That's a great point. I think it's interesting how, are you familiar with the special edition changes to these Cloud City scenes?
I think so. Yeah. Go on, please.
So like what we get in these set of minutes is we get like when Artoo and Leia and Chewie are running through the corridors of Cloud City, we see like that it's sort of partially outdoors. We see like this big, sun, this very orange skyline type of thing. But in the original version, it was just enclosed white walls.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So it kind of, I don't know. It's so Cloud City is so different when thinking about it. I think of two main colors when I think of Cloud City. One is like the white, and the second is that deep orange.
Yeah.
And very different vibes. So the special edition change kind of brings the sunset more to the fore, I guess, in these Cloud City scenes. At least, in this part where it gets really dramatic.
Yeah, and it's so romantic too. You know, if you took that out of context, you look at these like gas giant sunsets, and I do think that, and this applies to the music as well. I think I would say personally that Empire Strikes Back is the most romantic Star Wars product, like out there. I
agree.
Right? Just in terms of not just the that kind of classic hetero romance between Leia and Han, but also the aesthetic is very romantic. The way, like how sweeping it is romantic. Even the tragedy of it is romantic, right? There's something very big and bold and big emotion about everything here.
Yeah, I actually think Attack of the Clones is very romantic too.
Oh, right, that's true. No, you're right about that. No, that is the most overtly romantic. I might say Empire Strikes Back is the most successfully romantic.
Well, they both have "I love you" in them, so they're both pretty overtly romantic, I would say.
This is true.
I mean, this one for sure. This is Han and Leia's. This is their love road trip, basically.
Yeah. But you're right. You're right. Attack of the Clones is like, I mean, it was about the romance, right? That's true. But I feel like in terms of, I feel like there's a romance about the action in Empire Strikes Back too. Whereas I felt like the romance was like cordoned off to the main storyline in Attack of the Clones. You're right about that. You're right. I guess I'm just trying to like discern, I guess, kind of like an aesthetic sensibility. I think the aesthetic sensibility is very consistently romantic in every part of Empire Strikes Back, even though like it was much like front and center in Attack of the Clones, I guess. But you're right. You're right too. Well, let's get started listening to the minutes, and then we can have some concrete things to talk about. Yeah.
So I'll describe what's happening there really quick. Luke is like peering into the anteroom and kind of going into the hallway. He's basically on his way to the carbon freezing chamber. And obviously you can hear the footsteps. He's kind of looking, seeing if it's safe to go out. And then step. I think it's the music is very also ginger, I feel. Like we have a little bit of music and then it's pause, music, pause, which is kind of like what Luke is doing with his body as well.
Yeah.
And interesting to note that the music we are hearing is, well, That's Yoda's theme. Pause. Little interstitial. And then Yoda's theme again, but starting a whole step down. So it's like, we try it first. Which I think is, I don't know, it's really neat.
That's super neat. Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you for breaking that down. So let me ask you, what do you think, like, there are a couple of different ways of interpreting that, right? Like, so what do you think that means, like, in terms of, like, putting Yoda's theme in that spot there and then the repetition?
Well, first of all, Yoda's theme has been really present throughout Cloud City, like a little bit surprisingly so. Or surprising to some, depending. But I feel like it symbolizes Luke carrying Yoda's fresh lessons with him. Like, he left Dagobah, but Yoda is still with him, basically. And, okay, so when Luke is on his way to Cloud City, we hear a lot of, like, Luke's theme, which is the main theme. And then when he's on Cloud City, we start hearing a lot of Yoda's theme. And we hear a very swashbuckling version of it, you know, just a couple of minutes ago or just a minute ago. And I feel like now we're getting Yoda's theme, but it keeps getting, like, it's shrinking a little bit. Like, he kind of comes to Cloud City on a high, like, I'm going to save my friends. And he's kind of realizing, like, okay, I'm perhaps slightly in over my head. And kind of, the music is, like, shrinking down with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's almost like he's going further and further away, so Yoda's getting fainter and fainter and fainter, right? And you can almost hear Yoda be, you know, kind of sternly disapproving from a distance.
Or at least being like, I told you so, that you weren't ready.
Exactly. Told you so, I did. Right? It's just like, it's so sad. And it does a great job of, like, producing this really intense sense of anxiety. And I love how you sort of bring up how, like, it starts off with Luke's theme, really epically heroic and so forth, which is what A New Hope is all about, embracing so unironically. And then Empire Strikes Back is like, hold on a minute. Let's interrogate our assumptions. And here we have this scene that kind of makes you feel, oh shit. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, that's okay. I'm thinking about
So
I'm thinking about when I started. It reminds me of kind of when I started playing violin. Like, I had, like, I was pretty natural at it pretty immediately. And so I had a few years of just being like, oh yeah, like, I'm the best third grader. Like, I'm the best fourth grader, fifth grader. Like, this is so good. So, like, kind of, and being young enough that people were like, oh, that's so cute. You know, kind of just having that on my shoulder, having that to ride on.
Yeah.
And then I, like, switched to a, like, more serious teacher in, like, 7th, 8th grade, who the more, like, serious students in the, you know, we got the names of, like, oh, Chrysanthi should be taking from this person, should be, if you really want to be serious about it. So we switched to that serious teacher. And from the very start, that new teacher was, like, just right out the gate, humbled, like, right up, so much humble pie right there at the beginning. Just for the first year, it was just, I felt like I could do nothing right. Like, she almost dropped me because she was like, you're not practicing enough, and you shouldn't just be sight reading. Like, I've heard from the other students that you just sight read, and you think you can get, and she wanted more from me. You know, she was like, if you're doing all this by sight reading, you're old enough of a student in middle school to not have to fill a practice chart out. so it was just on my honor that I was practicing every day, and I wasn't. And she called my parents and was like, I'm going to drop Chrysanthi as a student.
Wow.
If So that was my Empire Strikes Back moment. That was my Empire Strikes Back era as a violinist.
But I could see that being either or both, like, super traumatizing, but also like a rewarding experience potentially.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I can think about similar experiences in my end too, where, like, we think we're all that, and then we kind of need to be humbled in order to grow more, right? As long as the cutting down doesn't result in being permanently cut down, and you actually end up growing more from it. That's the main thing. So that's great. I mean, look at you now. It's amazing. But yeah, no, that's totally like this scene of Luke entering and then being reflected musically is totally like Chrysanthi being told that she can only they can only sight read, right? Like that's totally what this is right here, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh man.
Okay. Let's continue listening, because what's going to happen is, spoiler, the music is actually going to cut out for a bit. We're going to get just the stark sound, just the raw sound of what this face-off is like. So Luke's getting like hydraulic lifted up. Oh, those gurgly noises. Okay, something that is very satisfying about this movie, especially on Cloud City, is just how many like little doors and spinny things and like things that open and close. How many of those there are.
Yeah. And to have, what's kind of interesting, right, is like the score is almost like this wonderful warm blanket that you can wrap yourself around to like sort of let you know that things are going to be okay, even when sometimes it's scary. Even Imperial March is kind of almost has a certain degree of warm comfort, but when it cuts out entirely, you're all alone.
That's such a good metaphor. I've been saying like a very similar thing all season, which is like the music lets you know that things are okay. Even if they're not okay, it's like you're going to be, it's still, there's a degree of okayness. Like you're back into the fable. You're back into something where, I don't know, it will be okay. But when there's no music, it's like you have nothing to anchor your emotions on. You're just kind of waiting for things, and it's very unnerving. Yeah. The blanket is off.
Yeah. The absence of it is so good all of a sudden, right? That's where the pause itself says so much.
Absolutely. I feel like modern scores do a lot less natural pausing like that, like how we had before. It's common to just kind of keep the beat persistent throughout a thing. And that is something that, I mean, I say this as someone who I was watching a Mandalorian episode last night, the new episode, and I was thinking like, I think the music's not carrying me through this scene like it's scripted to. It's a little bit too, but it's like a little too continually pulsing. Yeah. Okay. This part that's coming up is kind of funny to me.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker. But you are not a Jedi yet.
Ah, his breathing. The lightsabers are totally the music here. So when Vader walks up, or before Vader starts speaking, what it sounds like to me is it's almost like microphone feedback. Like Vader's about to like step up to the mic at open mic night. I'll play it again.
The Force is with you, young.
That was it.
I never noticed that before. Oh wow, that's okay. Now that you say that, that is actually quite funny. I never thought of it that way. Yeah,
I can imagine.
No, yeah. Now we have to like think about all these scenarios of Darth Vader going to an open mic night, right?
Yeah, and just opening with that.
Yeah. I wrote this after a tough breakup. You know, the snaps. Do you think Darth Vader is like one of those like? You think he's like a slam poet open mic guy, or is he more of a singer songwriter with a guitar open mic guy?
Ooh, I'm gonna say slam poet, but what do you think?
I think that's right. I think that's right. Although, like deep down, I want to see him with an acoustic guitar, but I think that's more wishful thinking than actually reading the situation accurately.
He's one of the really dramatic slam poets, though, who probably isn't self-aware of like what he's doing.
Is he? Yeah, he's like one of those like incel slam poets. Right?
Oh my god! Tell me that's not a thing.
I think it kind of was at one point, right? I mean, definitely in my time with slam poetry, I definitely saw some people that we would today call incels, right? These are like the men who are like very much not self-aware, right? And felt very entitled to their feelings,
Yeah,
kind of thing, right? That would be Vader,
that would be Vader.
Straight up. That would. I mean, if you think about his background.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just saying.
Very true. Very true.
I'm gonna go do some genocide right now because my mom is hurt. You know, so it's like totally on brand for Vader to do some incel slam poetry.
What I think is interesting from a sound design perspective here is how he's really finishing his breaths between saying things. Like he's not speaking very fast, and he's not like he's letting his breathing just be out there in the open. How dare he? No, but his breathing is not connected to his speaking, so he doesn't have to do that. So it is interesting, either from like a meta perspective of like, why did they do that? Or just from like an in-universe perspective of like, Vader is just taking his time. He can speak right over his breaths, but he's not.
He does a little bit though, right?
Yeah, he does a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That is interesting how they are independent of each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm just like thinking about how that works.
Yeah, I mean it's because because of his severe injuries.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Even though at the time of making this, obviously Revenge of the Sith didn't exist, so it's not like they didn't necessarily know the full extent to his injuries, like that all of his limbs are prosthetic, which is why Vader is taller than Anakin. Hilarious that they made Vader taller than Anakin. But they could because they're all prosthetics. I don't know if that was fully thought out at this time, but we do have evidence throughout both A New Hope and this movie that the breathing at least is separate. Like we can hear it being separate. So that at least has been established. Yeah. His mechanical lungs.
One thing about this scene that always struck me, I always like was very one little detail was always that Luke drew his saber first.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and like, which which is in direct kind of contradiction to Yoda and Obi-Wan being like, oh, always for defense first, right? I mean, that's what this is about, Jedi life. Luke's like, no, I want to get like edipally violent now. I mean, I guess it doesn't know that he's being edipally violent at this point, but
How do you think he's being edipally violent, or what's the edible part?
Oh, I mean, just in terms of like, it's like the patriciide.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Quite literally.
God.
Well, he doesn't. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
He doesn't know, but foreshadowing.
Yeah. Spoiler, Luke. But yeah. So like, yeah. So that kind of like youthful brazenness that future Luke would look at with considerable cringe.
Considerable
Like
cringe.
Yeah, no, Jedi Master Luke is like looking, watching Empire Strikes Back, being like, damn, like, wow, I can't look at this.
Totally.
But yeah, no, and there is something to be said for like, yeah, you have that open mic sound first, but then then immediately after that the breathing being the only thing in that room for a moment. Oh, it's so intense.
Yeah. And the scene, just like visually, oh my gosh, the shots in this, it's so beautiful. I was like, in preparation for this episode, I was just like sending screenshots to my brother and posting it on my Discord server, just being like, look at how beautiful this is. It's like we have we have, it's like blue kind of in the background. I don't know, I'm putting it on screen, but I know that you can't see it at the moment. But so we have the steps, we have like orange lit steps going up to this platform. And then behind the platform, it's like very blue with mist. And we see the silhouettes we see the silhouette of Vader at first, and then Luke joins him. And just even with that, it's the silhouette of Vader is so striking that you don't even need to see details. Even Vader backlit is extremely striking. And I guess this whole kind of Cloud City staging does remind me of like a play. You have this grand setting, and it's like just visually, I'm just imagining like it feels so specifically staged to me, like and choreographed, and
Yeah, no. I was thinking of, I mean, I actually am looking at it because I have it open on another window.
Okay, cool.
I downloaded it. And you're absolutely right. Not to be like one of those old people who's like, yeah, make movies like this anymore. But it is kind of true that there's something to be said for this like analog practical effects blurriness almost, right? As you said, right? Like the details are hard to make out throughout the scene, right? Because sometimes I feel like in the contemporary CGI fight scenes, even when there's obfuscation, like the obfuscation looks so intentional, here like there's just something very textural about its how do you say it's shadowing, and that's hard to recreate when you have the hard to recreate with today's much more perfect tech, I guess. And there's something amazing about its fuzziness. It's great.
I would say that the hard part to recreate is obviously not a technical challenge. The hard part is having the self-control to limit yourself to a smaller set of tools. Because I feel like the staging is almost of necessity. Best way to do it at the time. Like, I can imagine in a world where you can use CGI, you could use visual, the sky is the limit for what you want your scene to look like, what you want the background, like what you want everything to look like. I can imagine there being a lot more areas, a lot more possibilities where the ball can be dropped or little area, it's always a thing. Oh, fix this in post, do this in post.
Yeah.
And this is paralleled on the music side too, where things will be in a less finished state when they are perhaps filmed or presented or first recorded, because there are so many possibilities later for what can be done in post, what can be done, not that nothing, obviously a lot of things were also done in post for this, but what I'm saying is like having the scene a little bit more set up, at least, I don't know the extent to, this looks completely practical to me. I'm not sure 100%, but basically how many movies have scenes where you could also perform that scene as like a one-act play and not have it just look like a green screen or just look like all these things awkwardly missing. Obviously, the lightsabers are a thing that they didn't have completely practically, but still, like overall, it feels like I could walk around. I could go on set and walk around this. I could go up those stairs.
And of course, what's interesting, of course, is a lot of what we're saying about this as well. Wouldn't it make sense in 1980, right? Like, I think that a lot of what we're saying now is the consequence of having these digital aesthetic norms now. To invoke cliches. Now we have like all these AI programs that can create these AI generated images of people and so forth, right? Where artificial perfection has arrived, and here and so there's something very kind of specifically nostalgic about us being in this particular era of visuality and looking back at a previous one that at the time would have never been registered as such, right? I think it would have been interpreted in different ways and remarked, its beauty remarked upon in different terms.
Yes. One other thing that I think is relevant to this movie and movies that came before it versus movies today is regarding the sound. Because microphones are, there are so many more possibilities with sound technology, with recording technology these days. One thing that used to strike me when I watched old movies as a kid was how stage actory a lot of actors sound, and how their delivery is so so different from modern movies where you have a lot more subtlety, a lot more quiet speaking, a lot of things that are barely audible. And actors can do that these days because you don't have to necessarily project to get to a microphone that's really far away from you. And the delivery of just the way that scenes are acted and the way that actors for film are directed is different. And, the possibilities are, I guess movies are becoming less like stage plays, I guess, increasingly. I saw this video, I think it was about microphones or something, where they showed a really, really old movie, and it was like the microphones were so limiting that even if an actor just kind of wanted to turn their head to deliver a line, like the sound completely cut off. So like the technology kind of limited even the way that an actor, could be positioned in a scene. And which reminds me, like when you're like acting for stage, you will have certain things that you'll have to cheat a little bit perhaps to
Yep.
be facing the audience a little bit more. So there's a lot more of that kind of cheating. It's not cheating, but a lot more of that sort of cheating that makes it feel more stagey
Right.
in the past. And now it's sort of like the aesthetic is so different, partially because the technology is so different and not so limiting, which is great in many ways, and then also makes a little bit of the old way get lost, which is inevitable.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think what's also interesting, right, is like once you introduce a new technology, and you see this at the development of like Western theater as well, as once you have a new technology allow you to produce new forms of like naturalism and new forms of like of realism within your context, then what is in its immediacy novel and like revolutionary can very quickly become cliche, very quickly become the new hegemony, right?
What's an example?
Like I would say like Ibsen in the 19th century, right? So
Oh.
so like there's this way that like where you have like naturalistic prose dialogue being put on stage, and like when it first happened you're like, oh my god, like we actually have plays that reflect real life and how people really talk, and then within like a few decades that became such a norm that to do something different from that was seen as revolutionary, right? And I think what you're saying in terms of like I would say that there's that film and television dialogue has become so naturalized and familiarized that to see anything different would be like unacceptable to our brains, I guess.
100%. A lot of old movies were unacceptable to my brain growing up.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't I couldn't get into it. It was too much. Yeah. And then the last thing I'll say before we continue is musically, so we've talked about the staging, the set, the actors, the dialogue, but musically there is a very finished quality to having a score notated or composed for a live orchestra to play, as opposed to having something that you're doing all in the studio that you can just layer a bunch of things. You can make it up as you go, which is also a valid method of composition. I do it all the time. And it doesn't require you to have as much, it's basically like what John Williams is doing in these scores when he writes a scene is he's turning in like a book report, a final paper that is very close to finished. You just have to like read it out loud. You might cut a few things, but because of advances in technology, it is now possible to never turn in like a complete draft that is going to be how, it's possible to just say, okay, I'm going to do this scrap and then this scrap and then this scrap and put it all together. And it's not like you're getting a recording session set up and then the orchestra is just playing the thing and then you just put it in and the orchestra is doing the dynamics and doing all of those tempo changes because it's baked into how it's written rather than having to change dynamics after the fact. And, there's so much in the natural language of, okay, this is going to be an analogy. I'm trying to hold on to the metaphor. Okay. There's so much, like, if you think of the long history of classical music and the way it's developed and, for hundreds of years before recording technology with orchestras and everything, there are a lot of nuances and specific language and specific just possibilities that are exploited a ton in symphonic music, orchestral music, that, like dynamics, like tempo changes, like really specific articulations, like lots of details that are just part of that music. Now you can kind of put in the details after putting down something generic first. And let's see. Oh, the metaphor, it's not, my train of thought is very, sometimes I have like thoughts and I tangibly feel it in a way that's not really in words. But yeah, there's just something very, very almost like final draft about this musical composition here. And also because of the lack of micro editing in film, it's not like a ton of this was getting chopped up. Whereas now, because of micro editing, composers are incentivized to write things that are more, because you could chop that at any point and not miss it. So it's, which the way that this reminds me of plays is like there is a whole language and practice that has of theater, and without having the technology of being able to record things and edit things and CGI things, there is a whole language is a whole. Language is maybe not the right word, but there's a whole way of doing things that has developed without this technology and still makes sense. And a lot of the developments have been to compensate for not being able to do them more realistically. And I guess analog orchestras have developed kind of similarly in a way where they have their own confined, they have their own, they're perfectly fine on their own. If, written and put on well, they're perfectly fine on their own. You can add extra technology to them. It doesn't always, but yeah, it's not always positive. It doesn't always need it. It's not always positive. Obviously not negative by default, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, totally. That's a brilliant observation. I feel like, that there's kind of the way that contemporary tech encourages a kind of an aural modularity, that there's they can have these sort of fungible packets of music that you can reassemble at will, that sort of thing. No, I hear you. Yeah.
I've never heard that phrase, fungible packets.
You're right. Whereas here it's you're right. There's it's a long piece of prose in this music, right? Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Final thing, since we're on this tangent and I haven't talked about it yet, there are obviously a lot of musicians who post music on TikTok, Instagram, and whatnot, and because we can edit ourselves and everything, there is a really hyper edited quality a lot of the times to the things that musicians are putting out there, and feel pressured, the standard that we feel pressured to share things at. And so I think edited, I feel like, not everyone, but I feel like people can sort of tell or are kind of tired of just pure something sounding like it's very perfect. And there are a lot of musicians who learn, young musicians who are playing to post, and it fundamentally changes the way that you play and practice and approach what you're playing. And I say this as someone who also posts videos of me playing every week. But there are some people who, if you were to put them on a stage and ask them to perform this, it would be but I don't get 100 takes and splice it together. Yeah, so it kind of makes me want to, it has made me in the past year want to practice more and be able to not fall into that trap. I still want to be able to do something in one take, to practice it beforehand and not wait until recording day to get all the bad takes out, to do all the thing. I want to practice and then go in there and do it. No,
and again, I don't want to sound too much like some kind of old curmudgeon or whatever, but I do think about that Ani DeFranco song where she talks about it used to be called a record because it was a record of an event in a room, right? Where where you perform this song to be recorded as opposed to something that was like fully manufactured. And now she said now everything's about shoes, right? And selling this or that, right? So again, I personally don't necessarily want to take too hard a line on these things, but nevertheless, I do have I have this deep appreciation for the analog and a deep appreciation for that capacity to do liveness.
Yeah.
And to know, so.
Yeah.
For sure.
I also like both versions. I like building things up slowly in the studio. It's more like a personal, like, I hope I don't rely on this so much that my raw skill, that I forget about that part. Yes. That's more of what it is. Okay, tangent over. Let's continue.
But you are not a Jedi yet.
Okay, well, obviously we went back a little bit because Luke ignited his lightsaber first. It's about to clash for the first time. In 1 second. This is going to continue for another 20 seconds. Those clashes, to remind everyone, are partially created by dry ice, by hitting dry ice. Pretty abrupt shift there. Do you have any thoughts on the on this fight here? I don't know if "fight's" the right word, but
yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, it's a fight. What am I talking about?
I'm doing my best to do kind of a comparative with the Obi-Wan Darth Vader from New Hope. I might be wrong about this, but I seem to think that these lightsaber strikes feel sharper somehow. They're shriekier. I don't know. Am I wrong about that?
They feel that way to me too.
Yeah.
I think Luke is trying harder than Obi-Wan was.
Yeah. That's true. There's a again, it's very much that, like, I don't want to prove myself kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan is, he's kind of resigned. So yeah, there's an urgency here to those sounds.
Vader feels like he's play fighting here almost. He's like, okay, I'm going to entertain this for a little bit. Sure. Mm-hmm. Let's see what the young Skywalker has learned. Vader's not fighting to kill or anything like that, for sure, at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not bad. All
right. And now we can hear the abrupt cut, so now we are kind of putting Luke aside for a second, and we're going back to Leia and Lando and Chewie and Threepio. And this is the start of the cue 10M3, Chewie chokes Lando. And I love that that's the name of it.
Scene. I love this scene. I love
Me
this
too.
Scene so much.
Me too. This one, it's very, the music, ooh, okay, let's get to it. All right. We're going to hear the abrupt transition in 5 seconds.
Well done. Hold him in the security tower and keep it quiet. Move.
So it starts with the Bespin Dirge 1 theme, which is
Yeah.
You know, that thing.
So that's what it's called. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Though actually, it starts on an F. Sorry, I know this will not. I know no one really cares, but I want to play it right. Oh, there we go. D. There. There we go. Because then it's going to escalate.
So pretty. it's so pretty. I love listening to you play. That's beautiful.
Thank you. So it starts on. It starts on that F, and it's, you know, according to in Frank Lehman's catalog, which always have to bring up, it is one of two linked cues for what's called Bespin Dirge. And let me see if I can put up an image of the description and everything. So these are you can't see, but I'll read it out loud. These are a pair of linked funereal themes after the carbon-free sequence. So we get definitely like the funeral type of music here. And I love it so much. I love this funeral stuff. It's, yeah. Okay, so after that initial we hear, a little bit of waiting as well. Like it doesn't launch full steam into the whole, into the movement of the cue yet. Let's hear it again. See, little pause, little.
Well done. Hold him in the security tower and keep it quiet.
Little brass woodwind. And here, we have that again. So you know how the Yoda's theme went down a whole step. This goes up a whole step.
Right.
So now pause and then. So it's interesting how one side is losing right now, one side is winning right now, if you want to think of it that way. But yeah.
Yeah, it's like this clandestine thing, right? Where it's like the woodwinds are like, oh yeah, there's some good happening in between the cracks, and then we're gonna keep playing along how things are going, right?
Yeah, and this orchestration change is like it goes to before then we have this timpani roll, which here.
Hold him in the security tower and keep it quiet. Move.
There.
Yeah.
Leading to the next thing. And a couple episodes ago, we were talking about the timpani kind of ushering in these little doom moments. So this, I would consider this a little bit of a timpani doom roll, leading back into that, leading back into that theme, which is just played on low strings and I think like clarinets. No. Low strings, brass, definitely trombones, but notably no violins, just viola, cello, and basses.
Cool.
for this. Yeah. Okay. Continue listening. Oh, if you have the soundtrack, this is in the track Carbon Freeze / Darth Vader's Trap / Departure of Boba Fett, and this part started at 8:28 of that track.
What do you think you're doing?
Getting out of here.
And you're all alone. Had to be a mistake.
You think that after what you did to Lando?
What are you doing? Trust him! Trust him!
We understand, don't we, Chewie? We had.
Threepio is one of the stars of this.
For sure. This is like, I think this is my favorite Threepio movie. His like enormous crush on Lando Calrissian is like the greatest thing.
Okay, let me think about it now. He is defending Lando quite a bit.
Constantly. He falls in love with Lando immediately upon landing. It's like, oh, hello, my name is right? It's like, no, I knew Lando couldn't have been a bad guy. It's like,
Oh my god, I've never
like
thought about that.
such a big Lando fan for no apparent reason. That's just so funny to me. It's just like how obsessively Threepio falls in love with Lando, and this is an example of like the great writing around Threepio on so many levels. Just like, why does he develop this attachment? It doesn't make any sense, but it's so funny.
That is interesting. Yeah, that is funny because on one hand, he's cordial to everybody. That's just what he does. But he does kind of take Lando's side specifically and go out of his way to defend him rather than his like own masters. That is pretty funny.
Followed
also,
immediately by... Oh, sorry, go on.
No, also, Threepio always wants... He doesn't like to be doomed and in trouble. So I think he wants to believe that everything is okay.
Yeah.
I knew it had to be a mistake. I knew it.
It's like, it's just so funny, you know. He sees Darth Vader, who created him. Mm-hmm. No affect, really. No inner recognition or anything like that. But Lando was like, "Oh my God, I love you. Like, can we get married?" But which of course, you know. So I mean, the real, I mean, it's really a love quadrangle, right? Because like obviously Han and Leia are a thing. Lando's macking on Leia, but Threepio is really macking on Lando. Lando does not return that affection at all. It's like, and then meanwhile, Threepio is like the goldenrod block between Han and Leia.
Oh my gosh!
The relationship dynamic here is one of the most delightful I've seen in Star Wars.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to be thinking about that now. Yeah. What do you think of pronunciation stuff in Star Wars, specifically with Han? You know, like Lando calls Han.
I that's a good question. I mean, as someone, I mean, you and I probably both have this sort of interesting feeling of like having names that are not traditional in American context.
Mm-hmm.
And well, okay, actually, a better example would be my son, who I don't think was born by the time we had done our...
When we first talked, you didn't...
So my...
Your book also wasn't out.
The book wasn't out, But yeah, anyway, so my son is named Hikaru, Hikaru. But then at daycare, which is majority white, they keep saying Hikaru, and it's like really friggin' annoying to me. but it's kind of like one of those things where he's probably going to grow up with both pronunciations, just as, and you know, even when I say Takeo, like if I want to go hella Japanese, it's Takeo, right? But like, you know, but I'm okay kind of like rolling it off the tongue in such a way for the palate. So I'm used to being called Takeo, like that's fine. I call myself that, I introduce myself that way. It's not, it's no, you know, so I think Han is a similar dynamic. At least that's my headcanon. I feel like, you know, like there definitely could be some context depending on the regional accents of the galaxy.
For sure.
Wherever basic is being spoken.
Did you grow up with any other pronunciations of your name?
Those are the main ones. Yeah, like, you know, Takeo. Then there are the wrong pronunciations where I have to correct people. Mm-hmm. Right, so like Takeo, Takeo, so forth, right? Like those are like those are outside the boundary of acceptability. I also feel bad correcting the daycare people in Hikaru's case because it's like they are looking after my kid, but I do have to stand up for him. It's kind of it's like this thing. It's like the dynamic is complicated.
Yeah, it's interesting that how you there are like acceptable pronunciation. Like everyone has kind of a different sense of which pronunciations are just within the realm of acceptability, and then which ones actually need to be corrected. And it seems like I feel like for Han is fine for him. Leia, clearly Leia, sometimes Leia. She doesn't seem to correct people with that either. For me, I have this like thing where if people pronounce my name in a very overtly like trying to put on an accent, I don't like it. Like,
Yeah.
like if, for example, like if I'm just speaking just English with someone, just kind of, I have a very like American accent, and someone goes out of their way to be like, Tan, is it Chrysanthi Tan? I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. I'd rather you just say Tan, just say Chrysanthi Tan. Like it makes you feel more othered, I guess, when people go out of their way to be like English, American accent, and then Tan or something like that. Or even my first name, just, try to, if someone is speaking to me in Greek or speaks Greek, then they'll call me Chrysanthi. But in English, I'd rather people not try to do that. Like Chrysanthi is the official American pronunciation for me, and I prefer that.
Yeah.
For most people.
No, that makes sense because it's kind of like there's a cadence to language, right? And to each language. And if you want it to flow, you have that particular way of adopting it. That makes perfect sense. And then to do otherwise would be on the verge of like it would be like orientalizing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, I hear you totally.
And Leia's pronunciation of Han here is what is most interesting to me because she calls him Han throughout. She only calls him Han when she's on Cloud City and Lando is calling him Han. She kind of switches. And it kind of also reminds me of the way that like we will sometimes roll with other pronunciations when like our safety is depending on other people or like just when we have, just need to feel a certain way with regard to our status next to another person who is also pronouncing something wrong. Like sometimes I feel if someone is pronouncing something wrong to me, or just an alternate way of pronouncing things, sometimes to not make them feel like I'm calling them, like I'm overtly calling out that they're pronouncing something wrong, sometimes I will kind of try pronouncing it the way that they are.
Yeah, no, I hear that. No, absolutely. This also reminds me of like when I might order things at restaurants or whatever, and they have to call your name. I would say 80% of the time I go with my middle name, which is Ed or Edward. And it's just like, because I don't want to have to deal with the emotional labor of like either cringing if they get it wrong or like talking about it, being like, "Where's that name from?" I'm like, I'll just use my useful middle name for those purposes. So.
Yeah. For the same reason, I'm just like Chris.
Done. Yeah.
So here, when Leia says, "Do you think that after what you did to Han?" She kind of actually says it. I feel like she says it halfway between her old pronunciation and Lando's pronunciation. Like, I don't know if any of this was intentional, but she feels like she's between pronunciations. And I'll play it again so people can decide for themselves.
What do you think you're doing?
I'm getting out of here.
And you're all alone. Had to be a mistake.
Do you think that after what you did to Han, the world...
Yeah, she's like, she's not Han, she's not Han, she's Han.
Yeah, that's an interesting socio-linguistic moment.
It is. It is.
Choice. What are you doing? Trust him. Trust him.
Oh, but we understand, don't we, Chewie? He had no choice.
Just try it out.
We don't need any of your help.
So Lando's like miming. He's like Chewie's choking him, obviously, and Lando's obviously trying to get something out. What do you make of the music here?
Yeah, it's subtle
Yeah.
because so much of us, because so much of our attention is focused on the dialogue, and I have a lot of moments in my personal life where I deeply relate to this line that Lando says, "I'm just trying to help." Like, there's so many times where, like, again, in my personal life or other contexts, where I'm like, I'm trying to do something to help people get mad at me, when I'm just trying to help. So I think about the scene quite often in my life. In terms of the music, for me, it sort of fades back a little bit because the spectacle is so amusing. I guess. So.
Totally. Let's listen to it actually without the dialogue and everything. I mean, just listen to it on the soundtrack so we can get a better sense of what's happening there. Well, let me go back a little bit. All right, Lando's like, well done. Hold them in the security tower and keep it quiet. Move. Well, actually, that already happened. Anyway, this is the choking. And certainly the music is more in the background. It's less forward. It's not forward moving. Like, doesn't it kind of sound like there's like a bit of stasis?
Yeah.
It's like an aside. Like, first we have to strangle someone. It's tense. It's in a holding pattern. It's a very subtly effective way of making space for a moment like this while still not overall interrupting the drama.
Yeah, you're right.
And many of the instruments are just holding something or doing repeated notes, so it still sounds like it's same. So like the violins, for example, are doing just a very fast tremolo, which they're just holding it really softly, different notes. So all of that's happening at the same time, though. And then we have the viola and cello doing these snap pits, like these little plucks that are, I don't know, they're kind of like sparks of agony of the choke. Like here, do. They sound more sporadic. And the flute, of course, is also kind of going do.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought attention to that because, like, the music empathizes with Lando. I think, in a way never really occurred to me, actually. Yeah. And I guess I'm so fixated on, like, laughing at the scene that it doesn't occur to me that the music is telling us, like, oh no, like, Lando's kind of in trouble here from our big furry friend.
Yeah, I want to hear more about the empathizing part. Whereas I can see someone saying, well, it's just a very literal scoring of what's happening, regardless of whose side it's on. But do you feel that it's ultimately more empathetic toward Lando?
I think it is because it's heightening, like, not loudly empathizing. Otherwise, like, we'd hear it more prominently in the scene, right? It's more like, oh, this person's in trouble, kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like this person's suffering a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, the fact that it's kind of out of the way makes it more possible to hear the dialogue. Not even necessarily because it's quote unquote softer, but because of literally the texture that is built into the composition.
Yeah, you're right.
It's not very many active lines. and it's not really competing with the action, with the choking and the dialogue. I mean, we can't have music that's too prominent here because we can barely hear Lando. He's barely able to speak.
Yeah. No, I think in Lando's words, he had no choice.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to now the the minutes with the actual dialogue. So this is going back to okay.
I don't need any of your help. What?
It sounds like Han.
Let's do a chance to save her. At the east platform.
Chewie.
And you can hear in the music when he lets go.
It's louder.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like if you were literally choking, like a hose or something. It's like letting go of it. That's finally able to ring out again. Threepio is helping Lando here, helping communicate on behalf of Lando. Interesting to note that this is a sound we don't hear from Chewie that often, which is this growl.
Yeah. He's angry, genuinely angry.
Yeah. Like Chewie does a lot of groans, grunts, lots of laughing. He does lots of sounds, but this growl is, it's serious.
This is kind of just occurring to me just in terms of like Lando's peril just now. Like, I always kind of laugh at this scene but also like we kind of know that Chewie's not really going to kill him. I was thinking about like the kind of alternate version of this where Chewie actually does strangle Lando to death, and that would not be funny at all.
No.
It would be a very different movie and would have very different musical choices in this scene if Chewie just straight up murdered Lando in this scene, right? Yeah. Threepio would be inconsolable. Like it
Yeah, it would redirect our attention.
Happen,
narratively it couldn't happen. Like narratively it couldn't happen because it would take away from like the other struggles that we're supposed to be focusing on.
Yes.
Oh.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It just I feel like Lando is an interesting character for me to think about in the context of Solo: A Star Wars Story being out and having more time to spend with Lando. Whereas as a kid, I didn't feel like I had very much time to spend with Lando. So I don't think I didn't care about him as much. Yet I think I would have cared about him enough at this point to not want him to be murdered, to feel like he should probably not have that happen to him. Yeah.
I always liked Lando. I have to say, like, even in the scene, like, I'm laughing because I know he's gonna be okay, right? But like, but I'm kind of rooting for Lando to redeem himself and save people from the Death Star and so forth. I don't want to get just too off topic, but yeah,
Please do it.
I really wanted to like Donald Glover as Lando. It was hard. I couldn't get into him as Lando. I was really rooting for him, but
Do you know why you couldn't get into him?
For me personally, it just felt like he was doing a cartoon of Billy D. Williams, whereas Billy D. Williams, like he was just so at ease and natural being that, you know?
Yeah.
You know, there's almost like a too much intentionality to Donald Glover's smoothness. You know, there's even though he seems like such a natural inheritor, it just didn't click for me. That said, considerably more satisfying than whoever the guy who played, I don't even remember his name, the guy who played Han.
Alden
yeah,
Ehrenreich.
but I had higher hopes for Donald Glover, and it just didn't click for me. Like I have a whole rant. There are many things about Solo that I was very very disappointed in. But again, like that, we can say that for another day.
We talked about Lando a lot on last season, which was Solo: A Star Wars Story. And yeah, people have varying opinions of Donald Glover's portrayal. I liked it also better than Han Solo's. But yeah, Lando is a character that I still don't... I want to see more of him, because I feel like he, in films at least, he hasn't he's still a B character. Like, he's not given arcs, really. He's kind of the same person in Solo: A Star Wars Story as he is now. Just, yeah, well, so is Han Solo,
Yeah.
but...
Yeah, no, that's right. And it's almost, I almost feel like in Solo, he is, again, I keep using the word cartoonish, I guess, because like it's like a stereotype of what we imagine Lando to be as a consequence of Empire Strikes Back. Whereas I feel like he feels like a fully rounded person, even though we don't see a whole lot of him. But he seems appropriately complex and not necessarily just... he doesn't seem like a gag. Whereas I felt like in Solo, he felt like a gag. Here he's being literally gagged. But sorry. But he feels like a person here, I guess. You know, like he's got multiple things weighing on his mind. This deal keeps getting worse all the time. You know.
Yes,
so forth,
and I love that delivery.
And then it blows up the Death Star in Return of the Jedi. So there's that, you know.
Yeah, of course.
You got to pull Luke Skywalker. That was cool. So you know, it's kind of fun to see that arc a little bit. But yeah, there needs to be more Lando, but ideally in a way that, you know, gives us a lot of texture, like Andor level texture. Give us some Andor Lando.
Ideally. Yeah. That would be great. There's still time, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, continuing along.
Terribly sorry about all this. After all, he's only a Wookiee.
Okay, so now they're on the landing platform. Ooh, Tamora Morrison. Oh, this is the start of some really great music. First things first. Yes, that's Tamora Morrison's voice as Boba, of course. He replaced Jason Wingreen. And the shot of just Boba Fett, this is probably the coolest he has ever looked to me, is against the sunset, like just the colors are so striking. And again, we have that silhouette. And then, of course, his ship. Yeah, it's very striking.
Yeah, iconic. Absolutely iconic. And then the music, right? It gets... is this like another part of the Bespin Dirge, I guess? Where it gets like so much more intense, right? This really feels like a funeral moment, right? And it's almost like this is a casket being... like Slave One is like being lowered into the ground almost, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna put an image on screen for viewers. You can see in the background, you can see Han being loaded up, and of course, since he's frozen in carbonite, he is just laying flat. It looks like a casket. And this funeral music, it's funereal, and there's also, pressure on it. It's not like a funeral where, you're just mourning. It's like funeral dirge music, but there are still things that need to be done. You're still like actively trying to sort things out and actively trying to get out of peril as well. It's a really complex, I don't know, it evokes like a complex emotions in me, I guess. Yeah. So let's hear more of that. Okay, wait, too much is happening. Okay, I'm just going to go back a little bit.
I also want to say one more thing, which is that one thing I never really appreciated about the original trilogy is I do feel like Chewie gets all this casual racism, right? Like Threepio's like, after all, he's only a Wookiee. Or like Leia's comment in New Hope where like, oh, get this walking carpet out of my face. I'm like, Leia, that is awful. Like truly awful. Like I like Leia, that is cancelable material right there. Like this is like imperialist white feminism, Leia. Why would you say that? Like my God, man. This noble tall man is rescuing you. You're gonna call him a walking carpet? Like Han, disparage as much as you want, but like Anyway, I just want to put that out there for Mr. Chewbacca. He deserves more dignity than that.
It's true. And I think this kind of starts to pry open Star Wars is perhaps not always consistent, perhaps obviously still developing portrayal of different aliens, different species, even droids, and how it prioritizes different types of species based on their proximity to humanness.
Yes.
Because like a Twi'lek or something, that's obviously another whole situation of like the dehumanization of Twi'leks in Star Wars. Yeah. But still, like imagine like a noble Twi'lek character would still, I think, be treated more human because they're humanoid.
Absolutely.
Looking. Yeah. Okay, so this theme here. Let me go back because we have the first part of the dirge, which is right here.
Put Captain Solo in the cargo hold.
But we actually have both parts of the dirge at the same time there. So the part that we've already heard is the and the second part that we haven't heard yet in this set of minutes is the the slower part. And here we are hearing them both at the same time. I think it's a really beautiful piece of music. And then it's back to action,
Yep.
Morning is over.
Yep.
Yep. It's an ostinato, which means, it's a repeating set of notes. It kind of gives it a tempo. And meanwhile, the violins are doing some sort of, really fast quintuplet figure. And the tempo is obviously just quicker. So these are multiple ways that the change in the music, the score, can escalate the action of a scene. There's a tempo change. There is, the notes are different. There is now a different pulse, which is like a steady eighth note pulse. Just a lot of things change subtly while still remaining like, same basic tonal center and everything.
And then is that the Han and Leia theme that comes up? Yeah.
Yeah. But it's going to sound a little dangerous.
Right.
So. Now Han and Leia on the horns.
Artoo, where have you been? Wait, turn
This is another love story, I guess.
Yes.
Oh man, I love how Han and Leia's theme is spun out here. It does not sound lovely. I mean, it's lovely, but it's perilous.
Definitely perilous. I forgot to ask you, rules-wise, how much profanity can I use here?
You can use profanity.
Cool. Thank you. So, if we're thinking about Threepio playing Fuck, Marry, Kill, Artoo is Mary.
Yes.
Lando is Fuck, and Chewie is Kill.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
It just occurred to me. That's what's going on here. I was like, my old ball and chain's back. Here it is. Oh God.
That's
Sorry.
very true. Yeah. So something about the pulse is like this steady eighth note pulse, which is started by the cellos and basses, which, the pulse remains throughout, but it gets passed around the orchestra. So it's not always going to be the cellos and basses playing it. It will switch to other sections. So I'll play that. But let me just first play that handoff. Where
have you been?
I'll go back.
Wait! Turn round, you bully! Hurry! We're trying to save Han from the bounty hunter.
See, now it's in brass.
Well, what happened?
Now I think it'll be easier to hear if I play it without the dialogue. Okay. Okay, hear the dirge again. Incessant. Now it's about to switch to horns. Hear that? So there's always someone doing that pulse. And then even here. And now there's not. So, it kind of feels different there.
That's kind of cool how like how the strings and the horns kind of switch places.
Yeah.
I like that.
Does that have an effect for you? How does one feel different than the other?
It goes from the strings always have like this kind of, not always, but often have this kind of stabilizing effect. Like you kind of like the strings feel more like the blanket, I guess, in a lot of ways, right? Like they're like it's all blanket, but like the strings are the blankety-er blanket.
You mean like when they come in with the melody when they're like,
yeah.
Like that?
Yeah. It's like we're back in the romance kind of thing. Yeah, that's cool. And and I hear that carbonite music too. Da, 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 da.
Yep.
Like, what is that? Is that the carbonite theme? What?
Well, in Frank Lehman's complete catalog of the musical themes of Star Wars, he names that Neapolitan Emergency.
Neapolitan Emergency. It's got chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. That's that kind of emergency. Sorry.
I mean, yeah, basically. I mean, Neapolitan is a chord, but sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it goes, back and forth between, it's like an oscillating pattern that, well, let me play it. Well, it goes, sorry, I'm like, which version is it here? So just kind of dee 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 dee. Sorry. And of course we do hear it when Han is being carbon frozen. The emergency part is like the visceral part of the naming for me. It really is like all of this is emergency, but this is like really emergency. Like you can't even play the Neapolitan emergency for very long. It usually just lasts a couple bars. You can't wear that out. It's like the final, it's like the emergency brake. You've already done everything else, and this is like your last hurrah. And it's incredibly striking.
No, super striking.
Before then, the switch from, I want to go back to what you said about the strings being like a blanket when they come in. And John Williams, in the spotting session for the Carbonite scene, there's footage from a BBC documentary, and it shows him watching the scene, just the footage, the cut footage with it before he makes music for it. And he's watching the Carbonite freezing scene, and after Leia says, "I love you," he, in the spotting session, goes like, he mimes the violin playing, and he is sort of like, oh, obviously the strings are going to come in here, like the violins will come in right here. So it seems like John Williams himself uses the violins in particular as that blanket of like, even if it's not a blanket of good things happening, it's sort of like the main lyrical driving force is like when you want it to be the highest, when you want it to reach the pinnacle of its expression, you transition it, you put it in the strings. And in an orchestra, the strings are the biggest section of the orchestra. I think the violin's the best instrument, but literally in the orchestra, it has the most, the orchestra is primarily strings.
Right.
Because they just, they're quite a force when you put a lot of them together. Now, in an orchestra, you don't have very many solo violins, and that's where various woodwinds and brass really shine, is they can do really cutting solos, where in an orchestra, a violin usually can't cut through very much if they have a solo. So there's not very many solo violin parts in Star Wars music. It's just the strings playing together. But yeah, they're often used for dramatic, emotional moments, including love themes, including this, which is the love theme with the danger added to it.
Yeah.
And the part where the Neapolitan emergency happens is the part where Boba Fett's ship takes off. So, yeah, that's when Leia knows there's no chance. They're on the east platform, but they missed him.
Yeah. So sad. I hate it when I miss my train.
Yeah. And the look on her face is, there are some great close-ups of Leia in this final act of the film. And this is one of them where she's just, she missed him. And then the other one is later when she senses Luke. Just the looks on her face.
Yeah.
So let's continue listening. See, Leia has no dialogue here. Boba Fett's taking off. And then we kind of abruptly go back to the Han and Leia theme. Threepio's, oh no, Chewie, they're behind you. And then the way this cue ends. And that's where the music ends for the set of minutes. But just that very end it's not a fade out ending. It's not a triumphant ending. It's a stacked, these are just violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, all of the horns, all of the trumpets, all the trombones in unison doing this C sharp D octave thing. With that D ostinato underneath. And so it's like the giant cry for help, all of them at the same time, just this big unison. Yeah. So there's no more music. So let's hear how it gets out of that in the context of the minute, since I was just playing directly from the soundtrack. Because then,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say thank you for really breaking that down. It just gives me, just as all your analyses do, just like so much more appreciation for what's going on here musically.
I'm glad. That's what I'm here for. All right. Just music and sound, no dialogue needed.
You have learned much, young one.
And now we're here. So it's like the music stopped, but it didn't go to silence whatsoever.
Right.
It's still lots of sound. The music cuts out and is immediately taken over by the lightsaber hum. And Ben Burtt himself has said that in this film, they're trying to really make the lightsabers like the score. Like basically the lightsabers are the music here. Let me see if I can find. Oh yeah, okay. Here's a quote. Let's see. The movie is filled with wonderful musical moments, but as a sound designer, you also try to achieve similar moments with just sound effects or the combination of sound effects and music. In both A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, the policy had pretty much been to not use music during the laser sword fights because the swords themselves seemed to possess a degree of musical quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they do hum, right? And there's, I guess in a lot of ways, it never occurred to me till you said that there almost seems to be something like a meditative home to it, right? Like there's something, right, which kind of goes back to all of the kind of Buddhist and East Asian philosophies that were influencing Lucas and so forth, right?
Yeah. I never thought of it that way. I mean, obviously with the swords, I mean, they're the addition of the laser quality is, the sci-fi aspect of this, which is, of course, inspired by samurai. But the hum on top of that, I never really tied it back.
Yeah.
But now I just demand that my meditation app add that as an option for one of the sounds it can play. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Yeah. You could absolutely do that.
I'm making a note of that. If they're not going to do it, I can at least make it myself. It is meditative. It is.
Do they all hum at the same note? I actually don't know that.
Add a bass line? That's a good question. I don't know.
You can tell when two of
fact.
Because you can tell when two of them are on versus one of them are on, which is kind of interesting. But
how can you tell?
I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. Like it's like at a very obtuse level, it sounds louder. But yeah, it's interesting how that effect happens. Like, yeah, but I do wonder if they're all at the same note.
That's a good question. I don't know. Canonically, I guess I would have to rewatch all lightsaber scenes to know for sure. But one thing that is part of the lightsaber sound is that when they're in motion, they do change pitch.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's a Doppler effect happening.
Right.
And the way that was, do you know the way that was recorded? I don't want to, listeners, some people know. We did a massive episode in A New Hope season. I'll put a link in the show notes that was all about lightsaber sound design. It was an almost 4-hour epised with Justin Leo Kennedy. And we broke down lightsaber sound design in, I think, 4 levels or 5 levels of complexity. So went into very detail there. But it's always worth revisiting, and I don't know how common knowledge all this stuff is. Do you know how, Takeo, do you personally know?
I forgot. It's been a while.
No, that's all right. Yeah. Well, regarding the Doppler effect, like once the sound for the hum was established, Ben Burtt would recorded himself moving it around, basically, so that it actually, like, the fluctuation is part of it. Like, it's a key part of it, and was specifically recorded that way.
That's cool.
And the fundamental, like, hum, I mean, there's a hum and there's a buzz, and they're both added together for that lightsaber at its steady state. And listening to just the hum and just the buzz is like only tells you part of the story, and then putting them together and then hearing it with the Doppler is what makes the lightsaber, I think, really come alive, I guess. And I wonder if the reason it's easy to tell when 2 are present, even if they're at the same pitch, maybe it's like something with the phasing of the 2 sounds. Well, it's just, I mean, it's also just if they're moving, then we hear the slight, the fluctuations in pitch, then it's easy to hear when there are 2 of them. But lightsaber sounds are so cool. Understatement of the year, for sure. But
yeah.
But that's how a lot of things are in this movie, is like just so many cool details that just are so specific to Star Wars and now continually, copied or, inspired many other things that are like it. But yeah.
I think it's also interesting thinking about like the progression from this scene, which is magnificent, to, I would say, equally magnificent but in different ways, Phantom Menace, which I think
Duel of the Fates.
I mean, Duel of the Fates. I mean, I gotta say, like, I as much as people put down the prequels, I do think the lightsaber scenes are spectacular in the prequels, and Darth Maul in particular. But the audio choice is there, right? And like instead of the philosophy of no music in this scene, to replace it with one of the most memorable and driving choral compositions, I think is so fascinating.
I can't wait to get to that movie, actually. I can't remember. Do you like The Phantom Menace?
I do like The Phantom Menace. I mean, I'm critical of it, of course, but what it gets right, I think, is I think that's the best lightsabers battle. At a time when, Chinese wuxia movies were all the rage, I think this movie did a good job of embracing that kind of kinesthetic aesthetic, I guess, and I don't think and I think with the sequel movies we saw a retreat from that, but the prequels really embraced, the high Hong Kong choreography.
High Hong Kong. Ah.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I mean, it obviously didn't, not 100%, but it existed in the same ecosystem as the Matrix. And this acrobatic beauty that has fallen out of favor. I think we've moved on to a more sort of naturalistic freneticism, but there's something about these scenes are very beautifully done, and we can go on about Jar Jar. We can go on about like the multiple instances of racism throughout the movie, which is all very true. But there are certain contributions that Phantom Menace gave us, and that's one of them. It's just incredibly beautiful, beautifully made aesthetics that I think were appropriate for its time.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I mean, I do really like the Phantom Menace, but one of the critiques sometimes when people are like, "Oh, what are the best lightsaber fights?" People are very divided on the prequel lightsaber fights. Some people love them and think like they're obviously the best part, like they're obviously the best parts of the movie, or they're such iconic fights or whatever. But some people I have heard, sort of critique that they look too choreographed. They look too much like a dance. And for me, that's one of the things working in their favor, where I like that.
No, I agree, and I feel very strongly about this. So right, because that's why the sequel movies moved on to the more, we're gonna make it look like a fight. Yeah. But the thing is, like, the idea of the prequels is to show the galaxy before the fall, right? To show us the last vestiges of magic of the Jedi at their most magical. And that's what it's going to look like, right? That's going to give us this kind of visual vocabulary of epic spectacle, right? And I think that's what, and I think the movies really succeeded at that. Like wow, look how beautiful this movement is, and that's and I think that I don't think that realism should be the height of our aesthetic sensibilities for these types of. This type of thing.
Oh, you articulated that so well, where it's been like on the tip of my consciousness. I feel that so deeply as well. Yeah. I mean, the Battle of the Heroes duel is also critiqued for the same reason. And again, I say the same thing to that too, where, the height of, everything. I'm going to have to like look back at the transcript of this and just remember all of these like nuggets that you're dropping. But in that way, that aspect of the prequels is reminiscent again of the sort of staginess of the originals. Where you have a built out set. And again, it's not necessarily that they had built out. I know obviously there's lots of CGI in the prequels, but it's a set piece is what it is. It's a set piece. There's set piece themes musically. It feels like you're really in it feels like you're in a set piece rather than just like moving through something naturalistically. And I love those set pieces. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue.
Young one.
You'll find I'm full of surprises.
Luke's voice sounds really compressed there. I don't know why.
Your destiny lies with me, Skywalker. Obi-Wan knew this to be true.
No.
Vader's so obsessed with Obi-Wan. It's true.
It is. And then we get the carbonite sound effects.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So Luke, behind Luke, the hydraulic, this is from the screenplay. Behind Luke, the hydraulic elevator cover has opened noiselessly. All the while, Luke slowly, cautiously moves back, away from the Dark Lord.
Oh, too easy.
All too easy. Perhaps you're not as strong as the Emperor.
That sound, I forgot how prevalent it is in this movie. In this location, not just when Han himself is getting frozen. So the Raya. I call it the Paya.
Yeah.
Vader's playing around with him, really. Let's pull him up like a vending machine toy. See how that works out.
Thought. Impressive.
Impressive.
Most impressive.
That the impressive, most impressive thing, like that needs to be a much more popular GIF. I feel like I say that all the time. Impressive, most impressive, both ironically and unironically.
Is it not a popular gift? I mean, it is a popular gift, but I think I feel like it could be. It could be more popular. I'm surprised it's not more popular.
I feel like the most popular GIF that I see in Reacts is like, no, as far as Darth Vader GIFs go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, impressive, most impressive is pretty iconic. Like, we should give that a lot of internet space.
I'm pretty sure my brother had a toy growing up that had that as like a sound font. Is that what it's called? Like a sound loaded up. Where I think he had various toys. I think one of them definitely said "The Force is strong" with this one and stuff from A New Hope. But I feel like I'd be surprised if impressive, most impressive isn't one of them. This is before the point where Luke knows that Vader is his father, but Vader knows at this point, and the way that he juggles fighting with his son, but also just really just testing him, and then also goading him, but also kind of being weirdly proud of him. Father putting a son through these trials of gaining his respect or something.
Now that I'm a dad, I get it.
Say more.
He kind of is like he's 20 months, and he's learning words and numbers and letters and stuff, and there are times when I'm like just gleeful over the things he's learning, and sometimes, and then there are times where it's like he'll count. I'll be like 1, 2, 5, and I'm like, impressive. Most impressive. No. It's 3 and then 4 and then 5. Okay.
Noted.
I'm half kidding. But it's but like I don't know, like the affect, I like get it. I like get his like dysfunctional affect. I'm like, yeah, okay. That's kind of, I mean, granted, it's not like Anakin did any of the diapering and the multiple wake-ups at night or anything like that, so it's not like he necessarily has a right to be snarky like that, but as someone who has... anyway.
I feel like Vader sees Luke as a potential way out. Like, Luke is like a ticket for him to something else. He's miserable in his existence as Vader under the Emperor. And I feel like he sees Luke as like a new opportunity for something new, to rule the galaxy as father and son. Yeah. And I say this both quote unquote canonically according to all the stuff that I know since then. There's the Dr. Aphra book. There's like all this other material that has established how miserable and joyless Vader's life is, basically. And his interest in finding his son once he finds out about him. Yeah. But even in this scene, I feel like even if he doesn't just see his son as an opportunity to start a new life, he at least ostensibly is wanting to bring him as a prize to his boss or something. I don't know how much he even knows I don't know how much he wants to be a father, but I guess it remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, if you really take this seriously, the psychology of Vader in the scene is actually very interesting.
What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, like he like obviously doesn't understand fatherhood. Has absolutely literally no model for fatherhood. And there's this way, I think your read on it is absolutely right, right? Like I think there's a part of him that deigns to become the new emperor because where's the professional development at this point, right? It's not like he could apply to something else and leverage and counteroffer or whatever, you know what I mean? Like he's second in command of the galaxy, but that's as high as it's gonna get because Palpatine apparently keeps cloning himself or whatever. So it's like it's like, all right, so how do I advance in my career? I guess I could use my son, or as a backup, I can use him to like give to Palpatine for maybe a raise. You know, yeah. But anyway, there's something very, very hollow and dark about Vader's relationship to the concept of being a dad, which is cool. I think. I mean, it's not cool. Actually, but it makes for really interesting acting and really interesting. You know, I mean, great job, James Earl Jones, as always, right? Like, you know, there's something very evil about it that is fantastic. It's a fantastic evil to texture and explore. It's also a reminder that, you know, Palpatine should really hold more mental health seminars for his space fascists, right? Like
Top priority.
You should have a Zoom webinar, you know, they could talk about their problems. Because it's true, his work satisfaction is pretty bad given how many underlings he murders. Like,
yeah.
Someone really should report him to HR.
Oh, well, this is what happens when your boss doesn't even care. HR is not going to do anything.
No, it's true. It's true. You know, like, I guess they don't have Title IX in space.
They certainly do not.
Not in the Empire, anyway.
But yeah, Vader has nothing to live for, really.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't. What motivates him to get up? Just to do the Emperor's bidding again? You're right. No professional development unless he ousts the Emperor somehow. I mean, he just doesn't have love in his life. There's no way for him to move up. There's like not much else for him to. There's nothing. What would motivate a person like that? Which is why I'm going to plug the Thrawn books again. Which is why in Thrawn Alliances, when Vader meets Thrawn and they go on, like, they do some stuff. It's like the most, at least short-term, fun, or at least intrigued, motivated on a shirt. You know, Vader actually has a tiny bit of fun. If not fun, then he actually, you know, you can tell that he likes having a little thing to work on with someone who is can sort of match his cunning.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You know what's interesting is, like, on a more serious note, I think this is why powerful Force users really should not mix Force and political power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we see, you know, obviously the Jedi do this very dangerously throughout the Clone Wars series, right? But this is kind of why the Jedi ideal, as practice, as taught by Yoda, if even not necessarily in practice, is really this kind of monastic, reflective, removal from political, social, military life. Because when you become that powerful, then of course you're going to become this like all-powerful asshole. Because you know, then you get caught in the trappings of professional development. You know?
Yeah. I mean, and even if you are the Jedi Order, you're on the light side, etc., you still become a tool for people to manipulate for political gain, and you will be used as a tool to whatever. I mean, in the prequel era, they think that they are, they serve the Republic, and so they fight where the Republic tells them to fight, to defend, to save people. I mean, it's a little bit like the U.S. and you kind of go. The Clone Wars is very like, let's go into this. Let's go rehabilitate the people here. Let's go save the people here. Let's go all over the galaxy.
And it's always a highly problematic equation when you, and here we're going to get very Foucauldian, but when you're thinking about the government as having a kind of moral authority, right? Because it's one thing to be like, oh, we're going to serve our king, right? Which, this king deserves this land because of this silly reason or whatever. There's actually something even more dangerous about having the more secular justification of, oh, we deserve this because we're morally in the right? So to think about like the Republic representing the light side, so unequivocally, like that is going to get you in a lot of trouble ethically, like incredibly. Right? So,
what was the word you used? You said Foucauldian?
I'm referencing Michel Foucault.
Okay.
Foucauldian, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that's what you meant. Yeah, and the Jedi Order. I mean, obviously that led to the Jedi Order's downfall.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So, okay, let's continue. We have like 30 seconds left. Lots of things are falling.
Most impressive.
Luke jumps down to the platform. We hear he's separated from Vader. There's just a lot going on. Like an alarm has been set off. And Vader's pretty much in control here.
Obi-Wan has taught you well. You have controlled your fear. Now, release your anger. Only your hatred can destroy me.
So that's the end of the minutes. He says Obi-Wan has taught you well. Which, does he not know that? I wonder if at this point he detects that Yoda is still alive.
I don't think he knows.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, he has much more of a grudge against Obi-Wan.
Clearly.
Yeah. He chopped off all them limbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, but Obi-Wan taught him as well. Mm-hmm. Obi-Wan taught father, and Obi-Wan taught son, got him started.
Yeah. Yeah, he had like a brief unpaid internship with Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that whole like the whole soundscape of this is very it's so industrial.
It is industrial.
Yeah.
I mean, this Cloud City is a very industrial place.
Yes, absolutely, like 100%, right? So much as I think what's interesting about like so much science fiction, from cyberpunk onward, right? Like there's so much digitality and sounds of computers and this, but this is very much like industry. This gives us a kind of a different technological sonic landscape.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gas mining colony. Which is so funny, juxtaposed against its very shiny exterior.
Yes.
Yeah. It's an interesting place for us to meet Lando, certainly. And musically, Cloud City presents I already said something different, but I mean, if you recall, like the Cloud City music that we hear initially is it's like overtly gorgeous. And then it's, but there's like the choirs and there's like the choir going, and this very beautiful, like dreamy music. And then when we're on the actual premises, when we're meeting Lando and everything, it's very regal sounding music, like just super regal and put together and really old school, like in the classical sense, like old school British music. And now we're just like, everything's been ripped open. We have this extremely love-torn, agonizing music. Like, so from the start to finish of Cloud City, we start in one place and end up in a very different place all around. All pretense has been stripped, scene by scene, from Lando personally to just everything about the situation on Cloud City to Luke's, abilities, his, training. Yeah. So much. Do you have any final thoughts about this set of minutes or The Empire Strikes Back, the music thereof?
I feel like we've been very thorough, and I feel like I've probably said way more than I thought I would. This because this conversation has been so generative and interesting. Like, oh my God, we've gone on for, I don't know what the edited version of this.
The whole thing will be up. The whole thing will be up.
Okay, well, it's the whole thing. Yeah, we've been going on this for over like 2 hours now. I'm like, how did that happen? Oh my God. But yeah, I mean, it's because you're so interesting. Like,
oh,
geez.
Well, I mean, 5 minutes of Star Wars is, people think like, oh, well, what are you going to, when I tell people the concept of this show, they're like, okay, so you're just going to talk about 5 minutes? I'm like, first of all, I was an English major. Second of all, when you have talking about 5 minutes of like something so rich, there's so much material in this 5 minutes. There's so much material.
It inspires a lot of tangents.
It really does. Chrysanthi tangents. Someone called me that once, and I was like, yeah, that's accurate. Yeah. I won't even dispute that. Okay, so I'm going to recap the cues before the questionnaire. So the cues from the set of minutes were the end of 10M2, which is Luke pursues the captives, and then we heard all of Chewie chokes Lando, and the musical themes that we heard in this set of minutes were Yoda's theme, the Bespin Dirge, both sections. The ostinato, I think, is reminiscent of the Imperial's ostinato, so I'll put that as a maybe. And then Han and Leia theme and Neapolitan Emergency. And then if you're following along on the soundtrack, this is Carbon Freeze / Darth Vader's Trap / Departure of Boba Fett.
Nice.
Now, Takeo, this is exciting because you have been on the show before, but I didn't start doing the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire until the season after that you were on. So you've never done it before. This is your first time. Yeah. Are you ready?
I'm ready. And thank you for sending the questions in advance. I'm prepared.
Yay. All right. So the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire is the same set of 3 questions that I ask every guest. And the first question is, in exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
Sweeping, sentimental, heroic. Those are the 3 words that come to mind immediately for me.
Yeah. I feel those all. That's a great answer. Question number 2 is, what is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you are curious about, that you wouldn't mind knowing more about?
Well, I mean, basically all the things that you talk about on the show, which is, I mean, honestly, for me, it's vocabulary. Just because I don't have the training to know like what that type of sound is or what that type of technique is. So every time you bring in a very technical musical word, I'm very delighted. I'm like, yes, these are the types of things I need to like memorize. So I have the language to be able to describe things more precisely.
Having language for things is it opens up, it makes such a difference. And I feel like it can be thought of as being arbitrary. And I even think of it as being arbitrary too sometimes, because I'm like, it doesn't matter if you know the technical term for this, as long as you can hear it. But sometimes knowing what a thing is makes it more possible for you to then recognize it again later.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah. Finally, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
Yeah, I love this question. So I will say that my two favorite composers who are not John Williams are very different from each other, and that is Joe Hisaishi of Studio Ghibli, and Philip Glass.
Ah,
Yeah,
do
extremely
you have any
different.
favorites?
Besides Star Wars, I gotta say, like the soundtrack for Hisaishi that really sticks out to me is Princess Mononoke. Like every time I hear that score, I like it hits me hard. Like every time, I just think it's just so stunning and beautiful on every level. For Philip Glass, I mean, we can laugh about Philip Glass because all his stuff sort of sounds the same, right? But it's very distinctive and like the best work music. I will put that out there. Like I get so much done when I listen to Philip Glass, and I would say the soundtrack that I've repeated the most of his was the soundtrack to The Hours. I think that
I love that soundtrack actually, and the movie.
That's that soundtrack is. It's riveting and it inspires so much creativity for me.
Oh, I haven't listened to that in a while, but maybe I'll listen to it today. That's great. I don't think anyone's ever mentioned The Hours.
Yeah,
I feel like that's an underrated movie.
It is an underrated movie. I think I have some issues with it, but it's very smart. It's very smart, and the music is absolutely incredible. Another film of his, a score that I like of his was Kundun. I thought his Kundun score was absolutely, and probably one of the more unique ones he's done as well.
Awesome.
But The Hours is like compressed Philip Glass at his most Philip Glassy.
That's funny. Cool. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
coming back on,
you.
Takeo. Where can now that your book is now out in the world? Where can people get it? Or
You can get it from Oxford University Press. Again, it's called Model Minority Masochism, Performing the Cultural Politics of Asian American Masculinity. Yeah, you can find it on Oxford University Press. It's also on Amazon sometime. It's usually on Amazon. You can also get it as an ebook there. And you can follow me on Twitter now. Know that I've joined Twitter
That's
fairly
new.
recently. Yeah, that's new. I'm at Takeo Rivera, PhD.
all the links will be in the show notes. What are some of the? I'm just personally curious. What are some of the topics that you cover in model minority masochism, or some of the like media?
Yeah. It's mostly Asian American Studies project, so I'm thinking about basically Asian Americans' relationship to the model minority as a masochistic one. It's kind of in the title, and I look at objects as diverse as the murder of Vincent Chin in 1982.
Yeah.
I look at video games. I look at graphic novel. I look at Marvel comics. I look at
Oh wow.
it's a whole. I look at the theater of Philip Kangatanda.
Huh.
There's a wide range of objects I'm looking at. It's a multimedia project. So.
Very cool. Oh man, what video game?
There's a 2011 video game called Deus Ex: Human Revolution.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I kind of talk about the experience of playing Techno-Oriental's video game masochistically, and like how that sort of what you can unearth about yourself by doing something like that. So.
Very interesting. Definitely will put links to that in the show notes. Listeners, thank you for listening to another episode. This is let's see, we only have 21, 22, I think like 4 more episodes left for this whole season. So we are nearing the end. I guess the one thing that I'll plug today is my Discord server. The way to join my Discord server is to become a patron at any level. And there's a specific channel in there for Star Wars Music Minute research. So if you have I'll post questions in there for things I'm researching for upcoming episodes. So if you're the type of person who likes to chime in and has a lot of articles to share and whatever, yeah, would love to talk to you there. Otherwise, I'm on Twitter at Star Wars Musemin, or at Chrysanthi Tan. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Thanks again, Takeo. May the Force be with you. And thanks for listening to Star Wars Music Minute.